Apple just filed one of the strangest tech lawsuits in years, and buried inside it is a detail that sounds more like corporate espionage than a job interview. On July 10, 2026, Apple sued OpenAI in federal court in Northern California, accusing the AI company of a coordinated campaign to steal trade secrets. But the real headline isn't the lawsuit itself. It's what Apple says OpenAI's hardware chief was actually doing to get information. According to Apple's court filing, OpenAI's head of hardware is Tang Tan, a former Apple vice president who left to help build OpenAI's consumer devices. Apple claims that when Tan interviewed job candidates who still worked at Apple, he asked them to bring actual physical parts from Apple's unreleased products to the interview, not photos, not descriptions. The actual components, for what Apple's filing describes as show-and-tell sessions. Think about that for a second. A job interview at a company that isn't your current employer, where you're expected to walk in with hardware that hasn't even been announced yet. Apple alleges this wasn't a one-off. The filing claims Tan used Apple's own internal project codenames when talking to these candidates, specifically to help pull out more confidential information during the process. It's a small detail, but it's the kind of thing that turns "we hired someone who used to work there" into "we ran a structured pipeline to extract secrets through the hiring process." And Tan isn't the only name in this. Apple also names Chang Liu, a former Apple electrical engineer who moved to OpenAI. According to the lawsuit, Liu used a former colleague's Apple-issued laptop to get into Apple's internal network and exploited a security flaw to open shared folders containing hardware files on unreleased products. Apple also claims Liu coached that former colleague on how to leave Apple without tripping any internal security alarms. Put together, Apple's argument is that this wasn't a couple of employees crossing a line on their own. Apple's filing says the alleged misconduct happened, quote, at every level of the company, from junior technical staff up to Tan himself, the chief hardware officer. So why would OpenAI want any of this in the first place? This is where the story gets bigger than one lawsuit. Tan and Liu both work at I/O Products, the hardware startup OpenAI acquired in 2025, which was co-founded by former Apple designer Jony Ive. OpenAI has never officially announced what these devices are, but Sam Altman said back in November that the company had already finished its first prototypes. This fits a pattern we're seeing across the entire AI industry right now. Every major AI company suddenly wants to make its own hardware. OpenAI wants a device that isn't a phone or a laptop, something built around AI from the ground up. Meta has been pushing AI glasses. Google is baking Gemini deeper into Pixel hardware. The logic is simple. Whoever controls the device controls how people actually interact with AI every day, and nobody wants to be permanently dependent on Apple's iPhone as the gateway. But building consumer hardware from scratch is brutally hard, which is exactly why Apple's lawsuit lands as such a serious accusation. Apple is essentially saying OpenAI didn't want to do the hard part. It wanted to shortcut years of Apple's manufacturing and design expertise using people who used to build it. This isn't the first time these two companies have clashed either. Apple and OpenAI were partners as recently as 2024, when ChatGPT was integrated directly into Apple Intelligence on the iPhone. That relationship has since cooled, with OpenAI reportedly threatening its own legal action over how Apple implemented that integration. Apple is also reportedly moving away from OpenAI for a future version of Siri, in favor of Google's Gemini. So this lawsuit isn't just a standalone dispute, it's the most public sign yet that the Apple-OpenAI partnership has fully broken down. And this being the AI industry in 2026, the drama didn't stay in the courtroom. Elon Musk, who co-founded OpenAI back in 2015 before leaving its board in 2018, jumped onto X within hours of the news breaking. Musk resurfaced an old nickname for Sam Altman and posted that Altman had gone from, in his words, taking advantage of a non-profit to now trying to take Apple's phone technology. Altman fired back on X too, pointing at Musk's own SpaceX pitch for orbital data centers, calling him out for selling investors on unproven ideas while criticizing OpenAI. It's worth noting Musk has his own history here. He lost a lawsuit against OpenAI and Altman back in May 2026 over claims the company abandoned its nonprofit roots. So his commentary here is coming from someone who was already in a legal fight of his own with the same person. For its part, OpenAI has denied wrongdoing in this new case, saying in a statement that it has no interest in other companies' trade secrets. Tan and Liu haven't publicly responded. Apple is asking the court for damages, an injunction, and an order forcing OpenAI to stop using any of the disputed information. So to recap, Apple says OpenAI ran a coordinated scheme to steal hardware secrets through its own hiring process. That scheme feeds into OpenAI's much bigger goal of building AI-first hardware to compete with the iPhone. And on top of all of that, the fallout is playing out publicly, with Musk and Altman trading jabs while the case makes its way through federal court. This case is just getting started, and it's already reshaping how two companies that used to be partners are talking about each other in public. Whether the bring the parts to the interview detail holds up in court is going to be one of the more interesting things to watch as this unfolds.